The Aurelia Grand Hotel lobby shimmered beneath the opulent glow of crystal chandeliers. A regimented line of security guards, clad in identical black suits, stood like sentinels, effectively segregating the ordinary guests from the exclusive VIP section. In a quiet corner, a plain-looking man, dressed in everyday clothes, sat patiently with his young daughter, awaiting his turn to sign a maintenance contract. This was Caleb Vance, a single father, simply trying to make ends meet. Suddenly, Darius Kane, the head of security, approached Caleb with a mocking grin plastered across his face. "Wrong man, buddy," Darius sneered, his voice dripping with condescension. "This isn't your kind of place." A wave of laughter erupted, rippling through the lobby as several guests looked on with undisguised amusement. Caleb, unflinching, gently placed his cracked glass on the nearby table. Slowly, deliberately, he rolled up his sleeve. As the fabric of his shirt ascended, a tapestry of scars and strange markings became visible on his forearm. An immediate and palpable silence descended upon the entire space. The air seemed to thicken, charged with an unspoken recognition. Meet Caleb Vance, 38 years old. Single father. Former member of the Iron Veil Unit, a legendary Special Forces operative, presumed dead after the devastating fire at the Ravenfield base. Now he ekes out a living as a building maintenance engineer, dedicating his life to raising his daughter alone. His 10-year-old daughter, Aria, possessed a sweet, innocent ritual. Every morning, she would meticulously fold paper cranes from whatever scraps of paper she could find. Then, with utmost care, she would tuck one into her father's shirt pocket. "As long as the crane stays safe, you stay safe, Daddy," she would always say, her voice filled with complete seriousness. Caleb would simply smile, indulging her innocent belief, letting her hold onto that small piece of hope. If only protection were that simple, he often thought. Tonight was supposed to be just another routine evening. Caleb had brought Aria to the Aurelia Grand while he waited to finalize the fire safety system maintenance contract. The hotel was undeniably expensive, but it offered comfortable seating and, more importantly, free Wi-Fi for Aria's tablet. Aria sat across from him, her brow furrowed in concentration as she meticulously folded a napkin into yet another paper crane. Her tiny fingers worked with a surprising level of skill and precision. It was at that moment that the trouble began to brew. The hotel manager, having noticed Caleb's unassuming attire, approached him with obvious disdain. "Sir," the manager said coldly, his voice laced with arrogance, "the technical service area is located in the basement. This lobby is reserved for guests only." A small group of wealthy guests gathered at the bar began whispering and pointing in their direction. "Single dad, trying to get into places above his station," one woman said with a cruel, mocking amusement. "Probably can't afford a babysitter," her companion added, equally callous, "so he drags the poor kid everywhere." Aria's hands froze mid-fold, her cheeks flushing red as she realized that they were the subject of this cruel gossip. Caleb felt his jaw clench in anger, but he forced himself to remain silent for Aria's sake. "Look at that jacket," another voice chimed in, dripping with sarcasm. "Probably from a thrift store. What kind of father can't provide better for his child?" The cruel whispers grew louder, spreading like a noxious cloud. Aria's paper crane crumpled slightly in her small fist as tears welled up in her eyes. Caleb reached across the table and gently took her hand, offering a silent reassurance. "It's okay, sweetheart," he murmured softly. "They don't know us." But the humiliation burned, not for himself, but for Arya. She didn't deserve this callous treatment. That's when Caleb noticed a separate situation unfolding across the lobby in the VIP section. A young woman dressed in a simple black dress was being cornered by Darius Kane and two other security guards. The woman looked increasingly uncomfortable, trapped between the expensive furniture and their advancing figures. "Come on, sit with us," Darius said with a predatory smile that revealed his intentions. "The party is always more fun with a beautiful woman like you." The woman shook her head firmly, her eyes betraying her unease. "I don't know you," she said, her voice trembling slightly. "Please, just leave me alone." "Don't be shy," another guard said, stepping closer, further invading her personal space. "We're important people. You should feel honored to be in our presence." Caleb watched as the woman's eyes darted nervously around the lobby, desperately seeking help. Other guests, engrossed in their own affairs, pretended not to notice. The hotel staff seemed to deliberately look away, avoiding any involvement. Darius, emboldened by the lack of intervention, reached out and grabbed the woman's arm, his grip tightening possessively. It was at that moment that Caleb stood up. He moved slowly, deliberately, his cracked glass still resting on the table. He began to approach the VIP section. Arya looked up at her father, her paper crane forgotten in her palm. Caleb's voice cut through the tension like a honed blade, calm, controlled, and absolutely clear. "Take your hands off her." Darius turned, his face a mask of mocking laughter. "Wrong man, buddy," he repeated. "Wrong place, wrong time." The entire lobby fell silent, the sound of clinking glasses and idle chatter abruptly ceasing as two vastly different worlds collided. Darius continued his mocking laughter, making sure that everyone in the lobby could clearly hear his words. "What are you supposed to be?" he sneered. "Maintenance boy," he said loudly, emphasizing the derogatory term, "a broken-down handyman playing hero." The wealthy guests erupted in cruel laughter, their voices echoing across the marble floor and bouncing off the crystal chandeliers. "Single dads these days," one VIP customer sneered, his words dripping with condescension, "think they know something about honor just because they're raising kids alone." Another guest chimed in, equally derisive. "Probably unemployed half the time, living off government assistance." Arya watched from their table, tears streaming down her small face, her heart aching at the sight of her father being ridiculed. Caleb kept his hand firmly pressed against his shirt pocket, feeling the reassuring presence of the paper crane she'd made that morning. But beyond the surface of the immediate confrontation, he noticed details that others missed. The security cameras in the corners of the lobby had been quietly turned away from the VIP section. The emergency exit lights behind the bar were inexplicably switched off. Someone had orchestrated this entire situation. Caleb watched as the hotel manager surreptitiously slipped an envelope to Darius when he thought no one was looking. Money had clearly changed hands. The young woman in the black dress spoke up, her voice shaking with a mixture of fear and determination. "I don't know these men," she said, her words ringing with sincerity. "I just want to leave." Caleb spoke, his voice loud enough for the entire lobby to hear. "The lady said no. That should be enough for any decent person." Darius stepped closer, invading Caleb's personal space, his face contorted with anger. "Wrong man, buddy," he spat out. "You picked the wrong script tonight." The laughter grew louder, fueled by the spectacle unfolding before them. Several guests pulled out their phones, eager to record what they believed would be an entertaining confrontation between security and a hapless troublemaker. "Look at this guy," someone called out, his voice filled with derision, "trying to impress a woman way out of his league. His daughter's watching him make a fool of himself." Another voice added, "What kind of example is that setting?" Arya buried her face in her hands, unable to watch her father being humiliated by these strangers. Caleb felt that familiar coldness settle over him, the same calm and focus that had kept him alive through countless dangerous missions. But this wasn't a battlefield. This was a public place, with his daughter watching. The woman tried to stand up and leave, but Darius grabbed her wrist firmly, preventing her escape. "Come on, sweetheart," he said, his voice dripping with fake charm. "Don't be rude. We're just trying to show you a good time." "Let me go," she pleaded, trying to pull away from his grasp. "I need to leave." "The night's young," the second guard said, blocking her path, "and we haven't even properly introduced ourselves." Caleb observed more suspicious details. The bar staff had mysteriously disappeared into the back room. The front desk clerk was conspicuously absent. Even the valet had stepped outside, leaving the entrance unattended. Someone wanted privacy for whatever was about to happen. "Please," the woman said, her voice growing desperate, "I just want to go home." Darius tightened his grip on her wrist, his knuckles turning white. "Wrong answer, beautiful," he said, his voice laced with menace. "You're coming with us." The guests continued recording, treating the situation as entertainment rather than recognizing it for what it was, an assault. "Bet she's just playing hard to get," one woman said with cruel amusement, her words echoing the sentiment of the crowd. "Security knows how to handle difficult customers," her companion agreed, their callousness revealing a disturbing lack of empathy. Caleb's military training kicked in, his mind rapidly assessing the situation. 3 guards, multiple escape routes blocked, cameras disabled. This was undoubtedly a setup. But what bothered him most was Arya. His daughter was watching grown men laugh at her father's attempt to help someone in trouble. The hotel manager approached Caleb with fake politeness, his face betraying his nervousness. "Sir," he said, his voice dripping with insincerity, "these are valued customers. Perhaps you should return to your table and mind your own business." "This is my business," Caleb replied calmly, his voice unwavering. "When someone says no, that means no." Darius laughed even louder, his face contorted with arrogance. "Wrong man at the wrong time, buddy," he said, his words dripping with scorn. "Do you have any idea who you're dealing with?" "I know exactly what I'm dealing with," Caleb said, his voice carrying an edge that made several nearby guests stop laughing. The woman looked directly at Caleb, her eyes filled with desperate plea. "Please, help me." That's when Darius made his critical mistake. He shoved Caleb hard in the chest, attempting to establish dominance in front of the captive audience. "Wrong man, buddy," he snarled. "You chose the wrong fight tonight." The entire lobby watched as Caleb absorbed the impact without flinching. He stood like a stone statue, completely unmoved by the assault. "Last warning," Caleb said quietly, his voice barely above a whisper, yet carrying an undeniable weight. "Take your hands off her." "Or what?" Darius sneered, his face twisted in a mocking expression. "You'll call the police?" "We own the police in this district." He gestured to his two companions, who moved to flank Caleb on both sides, effectively trapping him. "Wrong man in the wrong place," the second guard said, his voice dripping with menace. "Time to learn your lesson." Arya wiped her tears and watched her father with growing fear. The paper crane in his pocket seemed so small and fragile against the imposing presence of these three large men. Darius tightened his grip on the woman's wrist until she winced in pain. "Last chance to walk away, maintenance boy," he said with cruel confidence, his voice laced with triumph. The wealthy guests held their phones higher, anticipating the recording of Caleb's humiliation and inevitable retreat. But instead, Caleb did something that no one expected. He slowly, deliberately, rolled up his sleeve. Scars became visible, old wounds that told silent stories of violence and survival, and there, clear as day, was a tattoo that most people had only heard whispers about, the Iron Veil unit insignia. The laughter died instantly, replaced by a palpable sense of unease. Several guests recognized the symbol and gasped audibly. "Holy shit," someone whispered, his voice filled with disbelief. "That's Iron Veil." Darius's confident expression faltered as he stared at the markings on Caleb's arm. "That's impossible," he stammered, his voice losing its swagger. "Iron Veil was destroyed. Everyone died." Caleb's eyes met Darius's with the kind of calm that only comes from men who have seen too much death. "Wrong man," Caleb said quietly, his voice barely audible, yet resonating with an undeniable power. "Maybe you should reconsider who you're dealing with." The entire lobby held its breath, the atmosphere thick with anticipation as the game suddenly changed. What happened next took less than 15 seconds. Caleb didn't explode into a chaotic display of violence like something out of an action movie. Instead, he moved with the surgical precision of someone trained to end conflicts quickly and efficiently, minimizing collateral damage. The cracked glass from his table became his first tool. As Darius reached for the woman again, Caleb swept the glass rim across the security chief's wrist at exactly the right angle, targeting a specific pressure point. The contact was instantaneous, causing Darius's hand to go completely numb, forcing him to release his grip on the woman. "What the hell?" Darius started to say, his face contorted with pain and surprise, but Caleb was already addressing the second threat. A wooden chair became his next tool. With one fluid motion, he tilted the chair at the perfect angle, using the legs to pin the second guard against the wall, effectively immobilizing him without causing serious injury. The third guard tried to grab Caleb from behind. That was a mistake. Caleb spun, using the receipt tape from the nearby concierge's desk as an improvised weapon. 3 quick movements secured the man's thumb in a pressure hold that dropped him to his knees, completely immobilized but unharmed. The entire lobby stared in stunned silence. 3 security guards were on the floor, groaning but not seriously injured. Caleb stood calmly above them, not even breathing hard. The laughter and mockery had died completely, replaced by an awed silence. Arya watched from her table with wide eyes, her heart pounding in her chest. Her father had moved like water flowing around obstacles, using everything around him as a tool, his movements precise and efficient. "Impossible," someone whispered, their voice filled with disbelief. The woman stepped back, free from her captors but shaking with shock. That's when she looked directly at Caleb and spoke words that changed everything. "You don't know who I am," she said, her voice steadying. I'm Celine Hart, heiress to Hartwell Global." The lobby erupted in gasps and whispers. Hartwell Global was worth $15 billion. "I've been working undercover," Celine continued, her voice growing stronger. "We suspected this hotel chain was involved in money laundering and corruption. These men," she said, pointing to the guards on the floor, "are part of a network that bribes hotel staff to let them operate here." Caleb's expression didn't change. "Doesn't matter who you are," he said calmly. "No one has the right to put their hands on you." Celine stared at him with growing recognition, her eyes widening with realization. "Wait, your movement patterns, the way you handled that situation." Her eyes widened further. "Your ghost, Caleb, from Iron Veil Unit." The murmurs in the lobby grew louder, transforming into a cacophony of surprised voices. People began pulling out their phones, sensing that they were witnessing something extraordinary. Caleb picked up his cracked glass and began walking back toward his table. "That man disappeared a long time ago," he said quietly, dismissing the notion. Celine shook her head, refusing to accept his denial. "You're the unit commander who vanished after the Ravenfield base explosion. Everyone thought the entire Iron Veil unit was destroyed." A former military officer in the crowd whispered loudly enough for others to hear, "My God, that's the ghost unit marking. He's real." The revelation spread through the lobby like wildfire. Phones came out everywhere as people realized they were looking at a legend. "Iron Veil was the most elite Special Forces unit ever created," someone explained to their companion, their voice filled with awe. "They were erased from all official records after a classified mission went wrong." Caleb continued walking toward Arya, ignoring the growing attention. "Mr. Vance," Celine called out, her voice filled with gratitude. "Tonight you didn't just save me. You helped expose a criminal network that's been operating in luxury hotels across 3 states. As if on cue, police sirens wailed outside the hotel. Within minutes, officers flooded the lobby, their presence instantly transforming the atmosphere. The hotel manager appeared, his face pale with terror when he saw Celine standing free. "Miss Hart," the manager stammered, his voice trembling. "I can explain everything." "You can explain everything to the prosecutors," Celine cut him off, her voice sharp and unwavering. "We have recordings of every bribe you've taken." The 3 security guards were arrested as police secured the scene. Evidence of the money laundering operation was already being collected from the hotel's computers. Those guests who had been mocking Caleb just an hour earlier now looked ashamed and uncomfortable as the arrests continued. Celine approached Caleb's table, where he sat quietly with Arya. "Mr. Vance, I need to thank you properly." Caleb was helping Arya pack up her origami supplies, his movements gentle and deliberate. "No thanks needed," he said, his voice low and even. "Just doing what's right." Celine noticed Arya's paper cranes scattered on the table, their delicate forms a stark contrast to the events that had just transpired. "Did you make all these?" Arya nodded shyly, her gaze fixed on her hands. "I make them for Daddy. They keep him safe." Celine picked up one of the delicate cranes, examining the careful folds with admiration. "They're beautiful, and clearly very powerful." As the police led Darius away in handcuffs, he shouted back at Caleb, his voice filled with venom. "This isn't over. You have no idea what kind of people you're dealing with." Caleb looked up calmly from helping Arya, his expression unwavering. "Actually, I know exactly what kind of people you are. And now everyone else does too." The lobby erupted in spontaneous applause, a wave of gratitude and admiration washing over Caleb. Those guests, who had been so cruel and mocking just moments before, now clamored to shake the hand of the man who had single-handedly taken down a criminal network. But Caleb wasn't interested in praise. "We need to go, sweetheart," he told Arya, his voice soft and reassuring. "You have school tomorrow." Celine sat down at their table, her gaze fixed on Caleb. The Iron Veil program saved countless lives during its operation. You trained the best protection specialists in the world. Caleb's expression remained neutral, revealing nothing of his inner thoughts. "I train maintenance workers now." "You never stop being a teacher," Celine replied, her voice filled with conviction. "Last night, you taught an entire hotel lobby that one person can make a difference." She pulled out her phone, showing him messages from around the world. "A security guard in Tokyo refused to harass a customer yesterday, citing your example. A bouncer in London prevented an assault using your exact approach. A father in Chicago protected his daughter's friend at a party." Caleb read the messages, his expression softening slightly as he absorbed the impact of his actions. "Wrong man is becoming a symbol," Celine continued, her voice filled with hope. "People are realizing that sometimes the person everyone underestimates is exactly the right person for the job." Arya looked up from her paper folding, her eyes wide with curiosity. "Are you going to help more people, Daddy?" Caleb knelt down beside his daughter, his gaze filled with love and tenderness. "What do you think I should do?" Arya held up her latest creation, a crane made from newspaper, its delicate form a testament to her unwavering hope. "I think your cranes should teach other people how to be safe." That afternoon, Caleb agreed to one interview. The reporter was respectful and gentle, her questions carefully considered. She asked about his military background, his daughter, and his decision to intervene at the hotel. "What would you say to people who think you were lucky?" she asked, her voice filled with genuine curiosity. Caleb considered the question carefully, his brow furrowed in thought. "Luck had nothing to do with it," he said finally, his voice firm and unwavering. "Training did, but more importantly, knowing that someone needed help did." "What about people who say civilians shouldn't get involved?" "There are no civilians when someone's in danger," Caleb replied, his voice ringing with conviction. "There are only people who act and people who look away." The interview aired that evening to massive viewership, capturing the attention of the entire nation. But Caleb's phone started ringing before it was even over. Corporate security firms wanted to hire him, offering him lucrative contracts and positions of power. Government agencies were offering classified assignments, tempting him with the promise of a return to his old life. Media companies were requesting exclusive deals, promising him fame and fortune beyond his wildest dreams. Caleb declined them all. "Daddy?" Arya asked as they ate dinner, her voice filled with innocent curiosity. "Why don't you want to be famous?" "Because the important work happens quietly," Caleb explained, his voice soft and reassuring. "Like last night at the hotel, like when you make cranes for people you care about." A week later, the Line in the Sand Foundation officially launched, its mission to train security professionals in ethical boundaries and responsible conduct. Celine had insisted on hosting the event at a community center rather than a corporate headquarters, emphasizing the foundation's commitment to serving the community. The audience was filled with a diverse mix of security guards, hotel workers, teachers and parents, all united by a shared desire to create a safer and more ethical world. Caleb stood at the back with Arya, wearing the same worn jacket he had worn at the hotel, a silent symbol of his unwavering commitment to doing what's right. Celine spoke about the Foundation's mission, her voice filled with passion and conviction. "We are not training warriors," she said, her words resonating with the crowd. "We're training protectors, people who understand that real strength comes from restraint, not aggression." The symbol of the Foundation appeared on the screen behind her. Arya's paper crane design, elegant and meaningful, a symbol of hope and compassion. "Every person trained by this foundation will carry a paper crane," Celine announced, her voice filled with emotion. "Not as decoration, but as a reminder that the smallest actions can have the biggest impact." The audience erupted in applause, their enthusiasm and support filling the room. After the ceremony, Celine found Caleb in the parking lot, watching Arya teach other children how to fold paper cranes. "Thank you," she said simply, her voice filled with heartfelt gratitude. "For what?" Caleb replied, his brow furrowed in confusion. "For showing me that real power isn't about position or money," she said, her voice unwavering. "It's about choosing to protect instead of exploit." Caleb looked at Arya, her face radiant as she shared her gift with others. "She's the real teacher," he said, his voice filled with pride. "I just follow her example." As they drove home, Arya held a new crane she'd made during the event, its delicate form a symbol of hope and compassion. "Daddy," she said, her voice filled with innocent wonder, "what if everyone had paper cranes?" Caleb smiled, his heart overflowing with love. "Then maybe everyone would remember to take care of each other." Outside their car window, the city looked the same as always, but something fundamental had shifted. A spark of hope had been ignited, a renewed commitment to ethical conduct and compassionate action. And it all started with two simple words: wrong man. 1 month later, Celine stood on stage at the Line in the Sand Foundation headquarters, a state-of-the-art facility dedicated to training security professionals in ethical boundaries. Behind her, a massive screen displayed the paper crane logo that had become a symbol of ethical protection worldwide. The auditorium was packed with security professionals, hotel workers, and ordinary people, all inspired by Caleb's story. "Wrong man, or right person, right time," Celine announced to the crowd, her voice ringing with passion and conviction. Thanks to one father, the world remembered that boundaries exist for a reason. The audience erupted in thunderous applause, their cheers echoing through the auditorium. "This foundation has already trained over 5,000 security professionals in ethical boundaries," Celine continued, her voice unwavering, "because real strength isn't about force, it's about knowing when to draw the line." The camera panned across the audience, searching for the man who started it all. In the very back row, almost hidden in shadows, sat Caleb and Arya. He wore the same worn jacket he had worn at the hotel, a silent symbol of his unwavering commitment to doing what's right. She held a fresh paper crane in her small hands, her eyes shining with pride and love. Arya whispered to her father, her voice barely audible, "Daddy, my—" "Cranes are everywhere now." Caleb nodded, his eyes fixed on the screens displaying the Lean in the Sand centers popping up in cities across the globe. "Yeah, sweetheart, but they always find their way home." Celine continued, "We've received reports from security teams in 6 different countries. A simple paper crane pin reminds them that protection means respect, that power comes with responsibility. After the ceremony, as the crowds thinned, Caleb and Arya quietly made their exit. They were almost to their car when Celine called out to them, "Caleb, wait!" He turned, securing Arya's hand in his. "I wanted to give you this," Celine said, holding out a small envelope. Caleb opened it carefully. Inside was an old photograph of him in his military uniform, standing with his Iron Veil unit team before the Ravenfield incident. On the back, someone had written in familiar handwriting, "Wrong man, no. Right person, right time. And we still need you." Caleb looked up at Celine, questions swirling in his eyes. "Your former commanding officer contacted me," she explained. "He's been following your story. He wants to know if you're ready to train a different kind of soldier." Maria tugged on her father's jacket. "What does it mean, Daddy?" Caleb knelt down to her level. "It means some people think Daddy should teach others how to protect people, like how I teach kids to make cranes." "Exactly like that." Arya considered this with utmost seriousness, then nodded. "I think you should. Everyone deserves to feel safe." The screen faded to black, leaving only the paper crane logo spinning slowly in golden light. There are scars that aren't meant to be flaunted but to be remembered, that true honor means protecting other people's boundaries. A father's real strength isn't in yelling but in the calm that makes others pause and listen. If you were him, what would you choose? Keep living quietly with your family, or step forward so the world remembers what wrong man really means. Comment right now, because your answer might write the second part of the story.